I'm here today with Amy Walters Cohen, who is a head of research within one of the largest professional services networks in the world, responsible for delivering rigorous, cutting-edge insights into pressing business issues. With nearly 10 years' experience working in applied psychology, she's led an array of research projects in topics such as the future of leadership, digital transformation, organisational culture change, and team performance in a disruptive age. She's the author of Ruthlessly Caring and Other Paradoxical Mindsets Leaders Need to Be Future Fit, which was the winner, drumroll, of the Business Book Awards Business Book of the Year 2024. So first of all, congratulations, Amy. How cool is that?
Thanks very much. Yes, very cool. Very surreal evening. And yeah, just fantastic. Fantastic to have the book recognised in that way.
And I think historic as well, because you're the first solo woman author to win the award.
Yes, that made it extra special actually when they announced that on the night. Just to feel like representing women in an area that has, I feel, historically been quite dominated by men and generally the field of business. So I think it's great just to represent branching out into those new spaces and representing women doing a good job of non-fiction business books.
And actually the gender balance on the Business Book Awards, it is terrific. I mean, it's obviously all, independently verified and so on, but, it is, we are getting more and more women submitting and more and more women, winning categories and stuff. But it was really, I had a moment when I was sort of watching you on stage receiving the overall award, just thinking, oh, it's so time for this. So that was brilliant. Did you have a good night, by the way?
Oh yes, it was fantastic, and the food was delicious. It was really good. Just fantastic night, and lovely to be around all those authors, and it's such an interesting crowd and great people, and great for the book list as well to see all the different books that are on show there. So it's helped my reading list a huge amount,
especially pile.
Yeah. Yes, 100%. Revolting Woman was right up there. I was like, that is a great title. So that's first on my hit list.
It is a great title. And so, I may say, also is Ruthlessly Caring. And I want to come on to that kind of paradoxical thing, but it's so intriguing. Before we go there, though, I kind of want to know, where did the idea come from? When did you go, do you know what, I need to talk about this sort of paradoxical mindsets?
Yeah. And as it said in my introduction, my focus is on applied research, and research projects is my day-to-day bread and butter. And unsurprisingly, this book came out of a research project that myself and my team were set in 2019 around this exam question of what skills and mindsets do leaders need now to really equip their business and succeed in the future. So we did whole big research project, interviews, surveys, lots and lots of literature reviews to map out what the future looks like, what future leaders need to be equipping themselves for, and also how to equip themselves. So who's winning awards for this space, who's being lauded as future fit, and what is it that's special about them, what's helping them navigate. And from that research, the five mindsets was part of the findings. We had findings around having an interconnected worldview and the skills that leaders need around ethical judgment, systems thinking, and the mindsets were also a part of something that was common, basically, among leaders who are being recognised as being future fit.
We should just say, for anybody who's wondering what you're talking about with the five mindsets, Ruthlessly Caring is only the first of five paradoxes that you have. So just quickly run us through the five.
Yeah, 100%. So what we noticed was a common factor with these future fit leaders was their ability to embrace paradoxes, not at an out there organizational level, but an internal identity level. And as you say, the ruthlessly caring is one of five paradoxes. The other ones are confidently humble. They need to be politically virtuous, responsibly daring, ambitiously appreciative, and ruthlessly caring. So it's really having that whole package of skills. And it wasn't that the leaders we interviewed had all of those skills perfectly mastered, but the common theme was that they could embrace paradoxes, and they all had those mindsets emerged as the common themes being demonstrated across the board. So if you've got all of them, you're well set up.
Yeah, well, if you have all of them, please phone in, because we'd love to meet you. Yeah, but there's a sort of meta capability below that, which is that ability to hold these. I want you to explain just a little bit about, you talk about how the sort of simplistic way that you might understand this is as a single continuum where you have, ruthless at one end and caring at the other. And so actually it's not like that at all, that these are two separate continuums and you have to find the sweet spot in both. So and I think that sort of underlying capability was what really struck me about the book. So could you just tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, and that's the main thing that I think as humans we sometimes find it quite difficult to get our heads around, because we like things to be simple, we like things to be either or, and black and white. That's where our brain defaults to. But as you say, the paradoxes are all about embracing this, two things that seem opposite, and yet need to coexist over time for success to occur, and they are independent. And as you say, I think often people see it as, oh, we've got ruthless on one end of the continuum and caring at the other, and it's
Which
about
are you?
sort of dialing one up and the other down depending on your situation. And that's really the wrong way to look at it. It's about ruthlessness exists on a continuum, caring exists on a continuum, and it's about being in the sweet spots of both of those, not overplaying either one or underplaying either one, and also embracing both of those situations at certain at moments, not just saying, oh well, in this situation I need to be a bit more ruthless, and but now today I'll be a bit more caring, because then you end up with a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde
Right.
leadership character, which people don't know where they stand. So it's really embracing both and not each sometimes, is the key difference.
And inauthentic as well, because you will have preferences within that. And I thought that was a really important point that you make about, some of this will be more natural to you, you'll feel more comfortable with it, but actually all of these are available to you.
Yes, and that's it's a question that comes up a lot actually when showcase some of this insight is, how do you stay authentic? And all of the leaders we interviewed did have, you never felt like you didn't know where you were or they were lost soul in their identity. And I think the challenge is that some of these mindset elements, like for me, it's the political. I don't think many people like politics at work or wherever it is, but you need to embrace it in a way that you do get the value of well, you can either embrace politics or not, for example, but they will be impacting your job and the resources you have access to and your team's performance, or your organization's performance. So it's finding a way to embrace each element in an authentic way where you truly get the value of doing that, rather than just having it as a tick box of something superficially. You need to really get it and really get the value that embracing that would give you. And another tip I sometimes give leaders is looking at the characters in business who maybe jar or trigger some of your values, and it's thinking about, okay, but what is it that they're doing that's treading on my values a little bit, and what is it that they do that I maybe miss in my performance because I have that reaction to how they're being, but there will be a performance value in it. But if you can embrace it in an authentic way that feels right and sits right with you, but just widens your spectrum of all the different ways of approaching leadership in your toolkit.
It's such an empowering way of looking at leadership, I think, because actually it's all about leaning into what you do well, but continually expanding your capabilities to do the things that don't come so naturally. And I found that really helpful.
Yeah, exactly. And it also doesn't occur in a vacuum. So I think as well, it's appreciating the very human nature of who we are, and we are all multiple things. It's just sometimes in certain situations, in certain contexts, different aspects of what you're capable of being will come out. So, for example, I've had some women come to the group and you say, "Oh, where would you stand on the ruthless caring continuum?" And they make a joke about, "Well, you should ask my husband" or something. And it's like, but it's a joke. But it is interesting. It's like, okay, well, what is that in your personality that for some reason at home this side of you comes out more, but then when you're at work maybe it doesn't? But what if it did? Because it's obviously in there. So how can you draw on those strengths that do exist in different environments is really, really key.
Yeah. So when you did the research project and you identified these 5 continua, I mean, was that a hypothesis that you were validating, or did it just emerge from the ground up? Or, how did that work?
Yeah, and we had the 5 mindsets. So we had the different elements mapped out from the data, and they'd come out as themes. So the confidently humble, ruthlessly caring, politically virtuous, they were mapped out. But the actual continuums around, okay, but what does too much humility look like? What does not enough humility look like? How is that different from too much confidence and not enough confidence? That played out a lot later, because it felt like we'd almost just scratched the surface we got the concept of the mindsets. It seemed to resonate with a huge number of leaders as feeling like, yes, this does feel a representation of why it feels so hard to lead these days. And then when I researched the book for the next 3 years, that was when I dug into, okay, but what does confidence look like as a skill? What does the sweet spot involve how do leaders find themselves off piste, being a little too confident or a lot a lot overconfident, or not enough. And I think I am very passionate about the continuums, because I think sometimes when you look at them on the page, you can think, oh, I'd never end up over there. But when you read them, it's like you probably will recognize it in things that you do, things you notice others do. So yeah, it becomes a lot more familiar territory and easier to creep away from that Goldilocks zone of each one than you may appreciate, for very valid reasons.
So that process of taking it from the research findings, from the model that you've established, to a book, what's involved in that for you?
Yeah, and it's a big it wasn't really something that I had planned to do when we set out on the research, but it sort of
wrote this book.
it seemed like something I've been talked about a lot. I thought about doing a PhD, and then it was like, no, the book, it seems like there's something here that people need to say and can
It is
delve
super
into in more
practical, isn't it?
detail. Yeah, super practical. It seemed to resonate, had a lot of interest around it. So I was like, well, it's worth spending the time. But to take it beyond that involved a lot more stories. So I interviewed more leaders, but less to extract findings and data, and more to extract, okay, well, let's have a look at this mindset in detail. Let's see, how has this played out for you in practice. Let's give me some stories of how this has felt. So yeah, involved a few metaphors, playing around with different anecdotes to try and bring it to life so the book feels engaging and interesting to read. And yeah, just mapped out each different chapter that needed to be covered. And there's a point where you realize how daunting it is, because I was like, okay, well, if I've got these 5 paradoxes, I need to do a chapter on the megatrends, a chapter on paradox generally, and then all of these 5 mindsets, and each one has a continuum. I think there's a moment where I realized how much work this is actually going to take to research every single bit in a huge amount of depth. And it's just, yeah, but staying true to like, well, I've got something here that I think is worth saying and will be really valuable. And that was really what keeps me going throughout the book to get it done. But yeah.
And what did it give you? So a huge amount of work, 3 years of translating all that into a book. It's a lot.
Yeah.
What did you notice during the process? And has it? And this is such a leading question, but I'm not even sorry. Has it sort of changed the way that you communicate and think about the work that you do? Using those principles.
100%.
Yeah.
And I have certain friends that quote extracts of the book back at me when I'm struggling with certain things. They're like, well, I read here that you should be doing this. So there's definitely a difference between knowing the theory or what is best practice, and then still getting trapped by different elements. But I think learned a huge amount about leadership, about myself personally, about how to stick to things when it gets tough. How to navigate certain situations and balance having difficult conversations and not taking the easy route out, because I definitely recognize myself in some of these areas, or recognize other leaders that had managed me. And so I think it's been really useful just applying and having that breadth of knowledge on it. But so there's loads of like little tidbits that I picked up from my reading and apply myself every day.
It's such an interesting insight into how the difference between academic writing on the one hand, when you are really looking at evidence and models and theory, and then what you did basically was shift that into practitioner, something applied knowledge, and that changes you as well as changing the experience for the reader, doesn't it?
Yeah, 100%. And it does. I'm always like, even when we do sort of white papers, or I'm always keen that they're practical. I think that's why I work in the applied research space, because I don't want something that just sits in a journal shelf and is very accurate and correct. And I want it to be accurate and correct, but I want it to be picked up and used and change people's behavior. That's the main thing. And also, I think when I don't think I realized how much of it I would feel would apply to me, because obviously it's very much targeted at C-suite level leaders, senior level leaders who've worked in business for 30 years or whatnot, and maybe perhaps become quite set in their ways of how they lead and what's been rewarded for them and what's worked for them. So you kind of think, well, I'm not a C-suite leader, so how much could I gain from this? But I think so much of it is just about human experience, human leadership, and you can take from it as much as you will. I definitely wouldn't put it on someone who just started their first management job, but I think there's something in there for everyone in different walks of life, and it's actually been picked up quite a lot by school principals and applying it
Oh,
to
wow.
education, and
Oh, that's
so
interesting.
it's gone in different directions. But I think it was originally targeted at C-suite, but there's a lot in there for everyone, just day to day.
I can imagine sports
Different
coaches picking up
habits.
as well,
So.
actually. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. So
Um,
yeah, different domains. I think it can be applied and
yeah.
used in different ways.
And that's
So,
wonderful, isn't it? When you write a book and then suddenly it sort of has a life of its own and it goes beyond what you ever imagined for it and makes new friends. And yeah,
yeah, yeah, for sure, and goes global, because that's the other thing. I wasn't sure how UK centric it was. We did interview leaders from around the world for the initial research, and then I think quite a lot of the leaders interviewed in the book I think they're mainly UK based from memory. But I was wondering, like, is there a cultural lens on this? Like, what we perceive as confident in the UK might be very different to what's perceived as confident in America, or different cultures. But actually it's taken off in Malaysia and India and Canada, so that it seems to resonate no matter where you are. But I'd be interested where the
yeah, whether it
Goldilocks
calibrate them
zone sits, and
differently.
how that, whether it slightly calibrates different, but the general principle seems to be
Yeah, I think you're
very.
right. And that's, I think, really important for business books is you have to be focusing on principles, don't you? Because things move quickly, and
Yes.
any book worth its salt is going to be sold internationally and ideally translated. So yeah, interesting.
Yeah,
But they can't be such broad
yeah.
principles that they have no earthly use. So, yeah.
No, and it's an interesting thing though around writing a book, because you feel like, especially these days, as soon as it's published, it's out of date. So you need to be very careful. Like the megatrends was actually, we'd done that chapter early on, and then I had to redo it. So again, tips for future authors: if you've got any chapter which is very stats heavy, do it at the absolute last minute before you publish, because things change so much. And we had COVID and all these other scenarios that then you need them baked into your book, but then you don't want them too reliant on it, so that it keeps it future proof, really, and so that it stays relevant throughout once you pass that time period.
Yeah.
But,
And actually, interestingly, some of the most enduring business books are really quite old now. You think about Atomic Habits or Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, and they last because they're based on principles, not
yes,
specifics. So
100%,
yeah,
100%. Yeah, and it's another good thing, I guess, for anyone aspiring authors, is because that's the dream ultimately, is to write something that stands the test of time, and it becomes almost a classic in leadership. That would be incredible. But I think it is about tuning into those things that our principles are very human-centered things that aren't so sort of time-bound or fads, as it were. It's really important to bear in mind.
I want to ask you about writing as well, Amy. What does that look like for you? I mean, you've done a lot of it, I'm sure, in your life, but what's your routine?
Yeah, writing's a funny art, and I'm sure many writers will have this experience. But there's always that day when you sat down and you've tried your hardest and you've written like a sentence, and it
Not
feels
even a
like,
particularly good sentence.
yeah,
Hey, I've never had
just a
to,
rubbish
obviously.
sentence. Like, oh wow! But I've learned that there's something in that process of sitting down in your brain, puzzling over that issue. Um, that the next day then you come and you write pages and it's all just like flowing, but for some reason there always seems to need to be that initial battle where it just I guess it's the writer's block, but it's sort of seems to happen very, very early on for me. Like day one, it's like writer's block, and then we get through that, and
That's
it all
not a good
flows.
start.
um, but I think you have to just not panic, and it's like, no, this is just the process playing out. And it's also very, I think I'm quite disciplined, and like, this is how much time I'm setting aside to do this task, and I'm going to sit down and do it, no matter, there are probably 10 other things I'd rather be doing. And again, it's just getting through that first discomfort, first fidgeting, sorting your books out, sort of getting your coffee, like whatever it needs to be. But if you can stick with it and persevere through that, then you get into the flow and get into the zone, and then it becomes very enjoyable, and you sort of get caught in it, and then probably go over the time that you planned. But I think it's definitely, you've got to, especially to write something like a book, you've got to be very what's the word, regimented almost with yourself, to be like, no, I know this is how I'm going to sit down, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to prioritize doing this because of I feel I've got something to say on this and it would be useful. So,
You articulate that so beautifully, that sort of resistance. And I think everybody thinks it's uniquely them and they're kind of uniquely bad at this. But there is that sort of, I'd rather do almost anything than.
yeah, everything else looks good right now.
And then once you're into it, you're like, oh, this is amazing. I love writing me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
remind him, it's not just you.
Yeah.
It's not just you. It's all of us. Yeah, amazing. I'm going to ask you, Amy, for your sort of one best tip. You may have given us loads already, I'm honest. But what if somebody's sort of at the start of this journey, what's the one thing that you want them to know as they set out?
Yeah, and it was quite tricky when you said the one best piece of advice, because looking back, I was like, oh, there's loads of things I'd recommend. And I think the most important one is just to stay focused on writing for your reader, not yourself. I think as an author, I'm an English lit student, and you can get very swept up in an idea or the way you want to narrate something or something you want to add in or a story you'd like to add in for personal reasons. But I think that for keeping that laser focus on, okay, who's your audience? What are the key messages that they need to get across? That's really paramount. So not being self-indulgent in that way. I read quite a few business books that seem to be quite repetitive or string something out and then repeat it. And I think the reality today is people are very, very time poor. And as an author, you need to think about doing them the honor of being respectful of the time that they have invested reading your words. So don't string it out. Just get to the point. What do they need to say? Make it engaging and get the point across and then move on. What's the next thing that give them, that respect of their time?
Yeah, it's so foundational, and it sounds sort of obvious when you say it, but actually it's so easy because you have so much knowledge, and then you start writing about something and you think, oh, and there's this story, and then actually if we're talking about that, we should mention this. No, stop it. Yeah,
just focus. Yeah, it's very tempting to do when you're in it.
Yeah, and you know so much about the topic, and you love it so much. And did you have somebody in mind as you were writing, or did you just kind of have a type of person in mind?
I think I had a type of person. I obviously work a lot with senior leadership teams, so I had a very good idea in my mind of who I'm aiming it for and who I want to read it. And again, it's things like, how long do you want your book to be? What sort of font? What word count are you aiming for? Because people are time poor. You want them to feel like it's a manageable thing that they're picking up. You want to capture their interest, but I think. Yeah, I think people are generally, you kind of got to write the book you want to read as well. I know that's a bit of a contradiction to what I just said, but it has got to be fun and engaging and keep people interested no matter who your audience is. So just because it's business book audience, it definitely doesn't mean they want something dry and or just because it's researchy and academic and it's a huge amount of references and research within my book, but it doesn't mean that has to be dry and factual. It bring out the stories and the human nuggets that people want to read and the little gems that they can take away. And I always, with my team, I always ask them, would you repeat that? Would you tell that to someone down the pub? That's the sort of pub test. Is that what's interesting and what you're giving the audience?
The pub test. I love that. That's brilliant. That's I've never had that tip before. That's such a good one. I'm also going to ask you, Amy, to recommend us a book. Not Ruthlessly Caring. You can't do that. Sorry. That's cheating.
And again, there's quite a lot that I'd like to recommend. There's so many fantastic books out there, so it's also hard to pick just one. The book that I really love, and I'm always interested in the books that stay with you for a very long time. They like fundamentally shift and reframe something in your head. And I read Real Self-Care by Dr. Pooja Lakshmin, and it just made me rethink well-being and reframe it in my head away from a state which I can achieve sometimes under optimum conditions. If everything's going right, then I'll have good well-being. More into a habit and looking at, okay, I sort of like read the book and I need to keep rereading it, but I did an internal review of all the day-to-day actions and thinking traps that I get into, and then sort of looked at, okay, well, what are the workable steps that I can do, like setting boundaries without apologizing, tuning into what your principles are and being intentional about where you're spending your time, and what are those early warning signs you get from your body where it's like, actually you're not in a good place, listen and take action to do something differently, rather than thinking, oh, I'll just book a spa day and that will solve everything. It's like not going to happen. Need to change day to day. So it's just an absolute goldmine of practical wisdom.
It sounds amazing. I've never even heard of it, so I'm going to definitely look that up. That sounds like one that should be on my bedside table. Fantastic. Amy, what a joy to talk to you. If people want to find out more about you, more about the work that you do, more about the book, where should they go?
Yeah, so the book's very easy. It's available in lots of retailers on Waterstones, Blackwell's, Amazon, WH Smith. There's lots of places online you can get it. I'm
Anywhere
also
they
trying to
sell
get it
books.
into the stores. Yeah, so do go and ask for it. And
Go
yeah,
and ask a bookseller. Have them by the lapel. Say, why
keep
do you not
hassling
have
them.
Ruthlessly?
Yeah, why is it's not physically in the store? And yeah, numerous articles and websites I've done previously, all of which are probably the easiest ways to follow me on LinkedIn, and there you'll get all the latest news and sort of research pieces that we're putting out there.
Brilliant.
So
I'll put the
yeah,
link to your LinkedIn
great.
profile up on the show notes at extraordinarybusinessbooks.com, along with the transcript of this conversation and everything. So yeah, go there for all of that. Really, really fascinating. Congratulations again. I'm so delighted for you, and thanks for your time.
Thanks very much for having me on. Absolutely pleasure talking to you.